It happened when I was in preschool. The funny thing is, it's roughly the only event from those days that I have a clear memory of. The rest is remembered the same way most things are remembered. Hazy. Piecemeal bits that string together into roughly coherent memories. I don't know why I remember this event as well as I do. Maybe it never actually happened, and it's a false memory my mind conjured up. And that's why it's so clear. It would certainly explain why I can't find any records of a tornado. The most logical explanation for what had happened that day, going through the area around that time. It was several years ago, somewhere between 2005 and 2007, maybe 2004. Even with how well I remember the events of that day, I don't remember the exact year it was in. There are other details that I don't remember either, like what the teachers' names were, or what my friends' names were, or if I had any real friends at that time for that matter. Nor do I recall what we did before the storm rolled in, probably what children normally did in preschool during the early 2000s. It's been such a long time that I honestly don't remember what the schedule was, or if we even had one. I remember that it was a beautiful spring day when my mother dropped me off at preschool. The sun was shining, and there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. The trees were all covered in buds and the flowers had begun to bloom. It was the kind of day you tend to picture when asked to imagine a beautiful spring day, if that makes any sense at all. The next few hours, minutes, I don't know how much time elapsed between the moment that I was dropped off and the moment that everything got weird. But the time between then and when we were allowed outside to play was presumably very uneventful, if I can't remember much of it at all. I do remember the teacher reprimanding one of the little boys in my class for pulling my hair repeatedly. I even remember his name. Well, I remember what the teacher called me anyway. She called him Mikey, so I assume his name was Michael. Maybe it was Micah. And I don't know if parents name their kids things like that very often in those days. I don't remember if Mikey had ever done anything like that to me before. I do remember that he was a troublemaker though. He liked to test the limits of the rules and basically do the exact opposite of what the teacher told him. There had been a few times where he tried to climb the fence to escape during outside time. Other times he would hide when we were called back inside. Anyway, everything started when we were all outside. The outdoor play area of the preschool was muddy and surrounded by several tall trees, and a chain-link fence that had ivy snaking up at it in places. I was doing what I tended to do at that age, and during recess for years afterwards, which was actively, whether intentionally or not, alienating myself from the other kids by acting like a weirdo. Unlike most girls my age, I was more interested in playing with whatever bugs I found in the grass than with dolls. I was, dare that I say it, a bit of a preschool pariah, at least with the other little girls. I got along well enough with some of the boys though. I and one of the boys, I think his name was Timothy, but it might have been something else entirely, were attempting to capture a large grasshopper in a plastic bucket, with little success. Suddenly, Timothy looked up at the sky. He looked confused. I continued following the grasshopper until I realized that he was still staring at the sky. And so I turned to look up at whatever he and many of the other children were now looking at. Dark, almost black clouds were spreading across the blue sky, at a remarkably fast pace if I remember correctly. Strangely, and this may just be the result of the memory being distorted over time, I remember that the clouds didn't look right. They didn't look like how clouds are supposed to. They almost looked alive, for lack of a better word. They seemed to swirl and bubble like a liquid, and the way that they spread out looked almost like something reaching giant tentacles across the heavens. I remember hearing one of the teachers shout to the one who was supervising us, just as the wind had started to pick up, and the black cloud completely covered the sky. "Get the children inside, now!" The teacher hurried us all inside the preschool in a very disorganized fashion. Normally, they would get us into a line first, but this time, she just herded all of us towards the door, casting occasional frightened glances upwards at the swirling dark clouds above. After we were all inside, the teacher slammed the door shut behind her. It was at that point I noticed all the windows had their shades pulled. The wind outside was howling loudly, and I could hear the sounds of branches from the trees hitting the roof of the building, and that was soon joined by the sound of pouring rain slamming into the tin roof, punctuated by deep rumbles of thunder that sent waves of fear through myself and the other children. I mean, who isn't afraid of thunder at that age? The teachers brought us inside the big room where inside recess was usually held. This time though, instead of being given the go-ahead to begin playing with the many toys in the room as we usually were, they told us to sit down facing the wall opposite the windows, all huddled together. Then all four of them sat down behind us, as if trying to form a protective wall between us and the storm raging outside. At that point, the wind was no longer howling. It was roaring. The power cut off and we were plunged into darkness. The only light came from the windows. The windows in the big room all had shades except for one. This big, decorative window that I assume was supposed to let sunlight in. I craned my neck back to look out that window, which the teachers had tried to haphazardly cover with a blanket. Enough of it was still uncovered that I could see outside. And outside, it looked like another world. The wind was whipping across the place where moments earlier we had been playing happily, sending branches and play equipment flying. I heard one of the teachers shout something above the roar of the wind and rain. Remember how I said that we were all inside? And remember how I said that Mikey liked trying to escape the preschool during outdoor play? Well, he had hidden outside again, and in the frenzied rush to get all of us inside, I guess the teacher forgot to make sure that we were all present until it was far too late. On the other side of the glass, looking inside in utter terror, visible only in the gap between the two blankets that were covering the window, was Mikey. He looked terrified. One of the teachers got up to go and grab him from outside, when the already terrifying roar of the storm suddenly rose into a shriek. The teacher didn't even bother putting on her coat. She just ran out of the door, leaving it open, rather reckless in hindsight. She grabbed Mikey and fought against the wind to bring him back inside. The storm must have had hurricane-force winds, because she looked like one of those newscasters when they're trying to stand upright in the middle of a hurricane. Eventually, She got him to the door and shoved him inside ahead of her. He darted inside and collapsed into a wet little quivering pile among the other children on the floor. I heard one of the other teachers telling me not to look, but I didn't listen. Sometimes I wonder if I should have listened to her, because what I saw next has stuck with me ever since. The teacher who had gone out to grab Mikey was inches from the door when something grabbed her. That's the only way I can describe it. Something large and gray, and moving entirely too fast for me to tell what it was, plowed right into her and sped off into the storm, taking her with it. It wasn't a tornado. If it was that, it should have sucked us out of the open doorway. It didn't look like a tornado either. It was just a fast-moving, dark, gray mass. All I remember for a while after that was the sound of screaming. And then I finally did the smart thing and I closed my eyes. Hours had passed by the time I got the courage to open my eyes again. Nobody had moved an inch except one of the four. Well, now it was only 3 teachers. She must have shut the door shortly after the screaming had started, because she was unlocking it when I opened my eyes. Everyone left the school a lot earlier than usual that day. I remember as I walked with my mother to the car, I would look around. Nothing outside had changed at all. There were no branches on the roof, no puddles on the ground. It was as if the storm hadn't happened at all. I've tried asking my parents about what happened that day. If they remember me being sent home early because of a storm. If they remember one of the teachers at my preschool disappearing one day and never coming back. They don't remember much. My mother has said that she remembers we got sent home early one time due to a local tornado watch in the area. That's about it. And even then that sounds incredibly suspicious. A tornado watch is issued when prime conditions for a tornado to form are present. If that thing was a tornado, we should have been issued a tornado warning, not a watch. And it wasn't a tornado. It couldn't have been. Besides the obvious fact that I shouldn't be here writing this down if that had been a tornado, I've looked everywhere I could think of for a record of a tornado in the area at the time, and I found absolutely nothing. Tornadoes aren't common in the part of the US that we live in. Because of that, I thought that it would be relatively easy to find a record of the storm, assuming that it was merely a tornado and not something less explainable. After all, there wouldn't be that much stuff to sift through. As I said though, I found nothing. Even then, a tornado is the most logical explanation for what happened that I can think of. But I can't find any evidence of one, and there are so many peculiarities about that storm that don't fit in with the tornado explanation. Especially the lack of any damage or even puddles after the storm had passed. Tornadoes usually leave trails of destruction in their wake. If that was a tornado, there should have been some sign of it being there after the fact. But there was nothing. I didn't stay in contact with any of my fellow children after preschool. I don't remember their names, aside from Mikey, and even then, I don't remember his actual full name, nor do I really think it would be a good idea to bother him about what must have been a very traumatic event, considering that he almost didn't make it that day. And I don't remember the names of the teachers either. In fact, nobody does. The preschool is still there. There are new teachers. The remaining 3 have presumably retired years ago, and new children along with that. For me, I'm moving on with my life. I'm in college. I'm trying to be an adult and do adult things. And I hope to God that I never see those strange clouds again.